Hello, this is Rita, and this is me and my mommy's podcast, and then my mommy, and there's me, and then just talking about this stuff, and then we tap dancing because this is the tap dancing autism podcast, and there's a bunch of animals, and I'll be trying to in my hair, and there's bunch of sand, and oh shit. Also, there's also that stuff, and I'm on my naked little oh, that kind of the old, yes, like a light stuff and that's busy. Oh, and those are them muffled. A boots are amazing. Also, there's me. I'm trying not to have a panic attack. Also, this is a podcast about me. I do that and kept dancing and blah, blah, blah. I did ADHD and that thing. Also, that's like your normal pop.
Um, Welcome to this week's Leta's Friends Fridays. We have an amazing father-son duo as our guests this week. I have tried over and over and over to introduce our guest, and I sound like a robot. Do you guys mind introducing yourselves today?
Absolutely. Why don't you go first?
I'm Ryan.
I am Rob Delana, Ryan's dad. We live in Sudbury, Massachusetts, and we're in the same house today, which is rare. Ryan's never around, but he's here today.
They tend to never be around once they get to a certain age.
We have a Sprinter van outside that he kind of lives in. So when that drives away, I know I'm not going to see him for a few days, but that's okay because he's off doing something cool.
One of the reasons we wanted to talk to you is your journey as a father with a child who's a complex or special needs child was something we thought would be interesting to our listeners. And then Ryan's life to prove to all these parents who keep telling me these kids will amount to nothing.
It's been a strange journey. I mean, in a lot of ways, somewhat non-traditional in the sense that when I go back and relive it, I'm not sure Ryan was a special needs child or really had a lot of the issues he was diagnosed with. He was a different kind of kid. He never stopped moving. He was really smart and questioned authority at every turn, and he did things his own way, and he would not take no for an answer under any circumstances. And so for public schools, he was a difficult kid to manage. And when that happens, they quickly look for, something to call it. And I think as parents, we knew he was different than other kids and it was harder than other kids. So we readily accepted whatever they called it. And that led us down a long path of different schools and medications. And, we can get into all that, but I'll let you lead the way.
I think a lot of times special needs evokes a whole idea of these kids have while they have unique needs, while they're not going to learn the same way, while they're not going to have fun sitting in a classroom all day doing nothing. I think special needs makes people think they're that much different when they're not that much different.
I think that's a good way of looking at it. If you put, in a public school around here, you got 30, 35 kids in a class. If you drew, you lumped the 20 that were going to cause no problems and be really easy to manage, and then you've got, 5 on one end and 5 on the other end. And Rye was on that more active end for sure.
And
It's interesting, actually, when you think about it, because, I went on this whole journey that we'll get into of being removed from public school in favor of therapeutic schools, them really not being that therapeutic, working much of my childhood to get back to public school. And then when I get there, I find out the kids who have been in public school the whole time causing more trouble than I have. My friends are telling me about going on the school ski trip and sneaking away from race practice to steal lunch trays and belly surf down the mountain. And, if I even thought about doing that, I would have, gotten reprimanded and, had a whole phone call about, you see, this is evidence. This is why he's never going to grow up to be productive in societies. You can really make anything serve to that evidence if you want to.
Oh, definitely. You were talking about therapeutic schools. I don't know that some of our listeners, especially the parents who have just started this journey, quite understand what therapeutic schools are. I think we all here have our opinion on therapeutic schools.
I'll tell you what we were told, and then I'll have Ryan maybe tell you what the reality was. So when Ryan was in preschool and was flagged as being different, we put him in the town preschool for a while. And then when it came time for the kindergarten decision, the town felt that he wouldn't be able to attend the public kindergarten, and we were pushed into this therapeutic school, and we met with the school, and the stuff that was good, the individual education part, and the transitions and previewing and stuff we thought he would benefit from. And then, the main difference was that they described when Ryan became dysregulated that they would hold him, and that's how they called it a hold. And they described it as somewhat of a hug. And if it certainly made sense if a kid was out of control and was running through the hallways and was going to run away, that it's easier to be able to put your hands on somebody to stop that than to talk at them. So we thought it was okay, and then we were trained on how to do it at home, and we were advised to hire a special needs nanny that was ABA trained who could perform these restraints when they were needed. And so quickly his life changed pretty radically.
Yeah, and I feel like for the distinction, there's degrees of support that you're offered. There's kind of traditional classrooms, and then oftentimes within a school they'll have special programs, and then kind of the last step is you're going to go to a whole school that claims to specialize in kids with special needs, kids with learning disabilities or behavioral issues, whatever it may be. The reality oftentimes in there is that it's really just the island of misfit toys in a way. Like there's kids with all different disorders, all different things that they struggle with, all in one classroom, one teacher, and none of the specific needs are necessarily getting catered to. Everybody's kind of going through it. And their best means for regulating things is when you get out of control and don't want to do what you're told, to put you on the floor. And the holds that were described as hugs were a lot more like wrestling matches. I was 5 years old. If a teacher threw me on the ground, I was 35, 40 pounds at that point in my life. Like I was getting crushed under these teachers. I was getting rug burns. I was getting bruises. They were covering my mouth, and their whole hand is the size of my face. So I'm hyperventilating in there with my mouth covered. So now I feel like I can't breathe and I'm having a panic attack. And I would come home and be like, they're trying to kill me at this school. I didn't have the language to articulate what was happening. So, kids exaggerate, they tell tall tales. They didn't necessarily read too much into what I was saying and assumed it was just that I just didn't want to go to school, didn't want to do what I was told, but I was really struggling in there.
And you can tell, man, the restraints were very negative, parts. And we wrote the name of our book is called Without Restraint. I mean, we feel strongly that restraint was overused in Ryan's case. That's not even the 3 schools that we talk about in the book, there were kids at those schools who did well, and the program fit them perfectly. And they were not aggressive kids. They were not kids that resisted authority. They did, they were pretty docile in a lot of ways, and they benefited from the parts of the therapeutic school that are good, the previewing and the transitions and all the stuff we talked about, the specialized education. In Ryan's case, it was
that one little part.
Was a terrible trip. Yeah, he just reacted really negatively to it. And then when we questioned them on it, we didn't get anywhere. And in fact, they dug their heels in even more and tried to convince us that Ryan must be schizophrenic because he can't appreciate that these restraints are actually meant to help him. And he should like the fact that he's on the floor, 3 times, 10 times a day. And so it really devolved from there. And that's the point of the book, that these kids are all different, all special, all have, strengths and weaknesses. And they try to shoehorn them into a model that they know, and it doesn't always work.
Leta was in one therapy where they tried to say, you can say it in the microphone.
It's gross. I'm putting my hands anywhere above my head. God, do it.
And she was 4 when they were doing this because she wasn't staying still for half an hour. And she was only in the therapy for about 5 weeks before I called her neurologist and went, you got 2 options. You pull her, or I'm going to the state legislature to get this banned.
That's incredible. I can't believe, oh my God. And that's pretty recent. A lot of times when people have read Ryan's story, Ryan's 23, so they always say the same thing. Well, this doesn't go on anymore, right? This, and let me say, yes, it does. I mean, it's
It
as
still
long as
is.
if a child is a threat to themselves or to someone else, they still have the right to restrain them. And it's still overused, I'm sure. And we're not as in
Well,
touch, but
it's how do you justify that, right? Is the
Yeah.
point, and part of this was they were digging their heels in, and really wanted to make a point they could do whatever they wanted. But there was a point where I tore a piece of paper in half because I was frustrated, and they're like, "That's a threat of violence," and I'm like, "How is that a threat of violence? It's a piece of paper." You know how many adults stick their middle finger out the window and scream at people in traffic? Like, literally, I just tore a piece of paper, and they're like, "Well, it's a sign that you're getting aggressive," which you could do things down the line. It's like, all right, what if we started putting people in jail for what they might do? You know, how you can do that forever. You could call anything a threat.
Well, an aggressive for girls includes crying. If you cry, you are. Go ahead, Leta.
I saw a boy throw a hammer at a teacher, and yet they didn't call the cops on him, and yet I threw a tantrum because I didn't want my hands tied together, and they said that would get me in prison.
yeah, no,
I,
I,
and I have a lovely teacher, and I almost killed that teacher. That teacher was terrified of that boy afterwards and would not work with that boy because he kept throwing hammers at everyone, including me.
Yeah, it's
But
not evenly applied, and it really depends on the teacher, the day, the circumstance, and and I think for kids it's hard. For Ryan, sometimes he would get restrained, sometimes he wouldn't, and sometimes they were more aggressive, and sometimes they were just it depended on the person, and particularly we found male teachers, and I think as a man, when we were restraining Ryan at home. I knew, I mean, my heart rate would race and it became a wrestling match and testosterone kicks in and you're going to win that wrestling match. And even when he was little, it just stay still. And I leave that thinking, well, what did that accomplish? So I feel you, Lita. It's an awful feeling, I think, as a kid, because you forget how big grownups are and how scary they can be. And when it's not really explained to you, it had to be awful.
Yeah, and in our book, we talk about which teachers did what, because oftentimes there wasn't really a protocol where everybody did the same thing. Different teachers had different personalities that would influence how harsh they were, how much force they used, what degrading things they said to you during.
I know I still have some teachers that I run into that are like, "Oh, I did X, Y. I must have been your favorite teacher because I did X, Y, Z." And I'm like, no. Do I know you?
And it's hard to recall. Luckily his level of detail in recalling everything was great. But I think as a parent, sometimes if I didn't hear anything about the day, it's like, all right, I'm sure it was fine. But especially when they're little and you're not really getting a full report, and then the teachers, we would get this handwritten book from the first school every night, but it was always their version of what happened, so it took it, one of the best things about writing the book was I got to go back and revisit all of that and then thinking about all that. And, when you were removed and the emotions are removed and you think, I'm just looking at this clinically, this is crazy. Why did we allow this? And I had a lot of guilt. I had to process a lot of guilt I still do because I let it happen. And I listened to these experts and doctors and teachers who we were told knew more than we did. And, that's a lesson for all your listeners. I don't care what diagnosis, I don't care what your formal education is, and if you have any medical training or none, or your kid better than anybody. It's just the way it is.
These were my teachers from my school experience coming up and going, "Oh yeah, I did X, Y, Z to you." And they really get annoyed when you're like 20 years past going, "I'm sorry, do I remember you?"
Oh, yeah, misunderstood you. Yeah, no, I probably, you only remember things that stick out, right? So things that stick out are probably negative most of the time.
And it is that. I remember all the negative things they did and all the stuff they said about me because I was mainstreamed and all the stuff they told other students about me. And they're like, "But we want you to say how cool we were." And it's like, I'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah. So it was a different time. Yeah, I don't know if that's the case. But yeah, there were a few good ones. I mean, I have to say there were some for Ryan, and I mean, I was lucky. I had really good
Yeah, yeah.
people along the way.
I like being diagnosed in the 80s was a fun time.
I can't imagine. I mean, I mean we're roughly the same age, and I have no recollection of kids that were different. They just were banished, right? They just went away, or they were in a special part of the school you never saw. I mean, we were not just mainstream, but we were grouped by intellect. I mean, we were tracked, right? I mean, they called it tracking back then, and
Yeah.
and I have friends that were in the lower ones that they were all but told, I hope you can fix a car or fix an airplane or sweep up because you have no hope otherwise. And it's like, oh, that's the way it was back then. So I would love to hear what your experience was.
To put it even worse, I was in the top group. I was in with all the really smart kids with the speech delay and the autism and all that. And they're all like, well, you can't tell anyone you have this because if you do, you will be put in the group that's not as good. And, we all knew who the kids who were not as good were.
Wow, that's
And
incredible.
then it was stupid stuff like there was one teacher in kindergarten, and it's just things that stand out. She forgot I was part of the class, and every week we would get, we were learning our letters. Someone would get to go home with one of the letters, and she's like, "Oh yeah, because you're in your special class during that time, I forgot you were part of the class."
And I can imagine, I mean, back then you probably had gym and home ec and things like that. That had to be even more stressful than maybe the academic piece, is that you had to do certain things. There was no like opting out, or I don't feel like
Yeah.
playing kickball today. There was none of that.
Like, and then they're like, I work with politicos now, and they're like, "Oh, you can get us in to meet these people." I'm like, "I don't know who you are. I'm not getting you in to see these VIPs."
We're not that close. Funny.
But I mean, one of the things I think some of our listeners, especially parents who are just starting the journey, don't completely understand is these kids, we still in autism have the books like How to Mourn Your Autistic Child, How to Mourn Your Autism. Oh, would you like to take this one, Leta? And child book, grand. There are books on how to mourn your autistic grandchild because obviously you need to mourn the child you're never going to have. And this should be said sarcastically because I don't believe it.
That's
But
a good point. Now, we were told that the first school I can vividly remember his teacher saying, your expectations are too high. You have to mourn the kid you thought you would have. I forget exactly how she put it, but that was the message.
you obviously didn't need to mourn Ryan that much.
No. I mean, did my expectation, was it, I played college baseball. Did I want Ryan to play baseball? Yes, I did. Was it hard when I realized it was not going to be a good sport for him? Sure. But, and the big main part to our story is the skiing that happened. And that was just by happenstance. I wasn't a skier. I just desperately looked for things for Ryan to do, keep him out of trouble, get him out of the house. And one day we went to a ski hill. I let him tell a story, and I saw a different kid that day, and rather than warn him, I finally had something where I could celebrate him and that he was so good at something. And it was the first place where he was allowed to take risks, and he was rewarded for those risks, and nobody questioned his sanity. In fact, they were, people were on the side clapping when he would climb up something and ski down it. And I was, wow, it feels special, right, to have this kid on this hill. And it took me a while to realize he was special everywhere else. He was awesome everywhere else. He was such a great kid to raise, and he just did anything he wanted to do, he could do. And he was Superman in a lot of ways, except, when I had a school telling me that he was awful. And I had to finally meld those two together and say, is he the easiest kid in the world to teach in his classroom? Sure. No, he's not. But his strengths are so vast. He can accomplish anything when he puts his mind to it. So I took skiing to finally see it.
For sure. And it took skiing for me to see it as well, because up to that point, I was 4, 5, 6 years old, being told that I was going to end up in jail if I didn't figure my life out. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I'm at home playing with building blocks and I'm going to school, and they're like, if you can't learn how to like sit still and listen to us, you're going to be dead or in jail by the time you're 18. And that's crazy. And you internalize a lot of that. And you don't really have the tools for that other than like, it must have just been predetermined that I was supposed to be a bad guy. You know, like there's the bad guys in the movies, there's the good guys in the movies. I'm like, I guess I was just born as one of the bad guys. I never got to have a shot. And all of a sudden I click into this pair of skis and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm good at this and I'm having fun doing this. And people are happy for me and encouraging me to do this thing. It didn't take long for me to be like, okay, I'm just going to find a way to make my life about skiing. I picked a good one for assigning my identity to my first passion. I'm glad it was one like skiing where you're going to see beautiful parts of nature, you're going to exercise, you're going to meet great people, you know. Not no insult to anybody who plays chess, but it's like if you're like the best chess player in the world, it's the same board, you know. You get really good at skiing, you can really see so many incredible places.
And for us, that was part of the experience. Was everybody saw Ryan video or pictures of him on the mountain, but the ride there, or the travel, sometimes we flew places, or the chairlift rides, and it was just he and I, and we had a lot of time to just talk and get away from everything that was going on at home and at school. And that one for me was as fun as the ski part, because it's, if anything, the ski part was more stressful because he was so good so fast and I was terrible. And I had to keep up with him because he was too young to let go on his own. And he wanted to always do the hardest runs on the mountain. And I was life or death. And so when we were finally sitting on the chairlift, I was kind of relieved, like, all right, this is for the next 5 minutes, I'm okay. And we had some great times, and I really got to know him in a way that I probably should have known him before. And we were on this hamster wheel of everything going on, and I never really had that chance.
And I think a lot of parents, I mean, we had the added benefit of I'd had all these therapists over the years telling me what I was like. So when she came along, I'm like, yeah, between my PhD and all of my lived experience, you're idiots. I'm not listening to you.
That was a good instinct. You were smart. We had the opposite. My wife and I were rule followers. We'd sort of gotten where we got in life by listening to everybody. And now it was the first time in our life where I think we had to say, the person with the most education or the degree is not necessarily the smartest in the room. And that took a lot. I'm glad you were able to, you sort of have that in you, I think, right? And
Well,
good instinct.
Okay, Leta's saying I listened to a few of them. I didn't. I listened to your neurologist for 5 weeks on ABA. I think 5 weeks was probably less. She's giving me
we did it for like 15 years. No, well, at least 5 years anyway.
No, having a mom who walked out at 5 weeks going, hi, you have 2 options, Frank. You either get her out of here or I'm not a happy camper. But you can say that into the microphone.
Yes, and I'm still scarred by those 5 weeks, and everybody keeps thinking I can just get over being tied to a chair and just suddenly be able to put my arms above my head.
And it's terrible, Leta, and it's hard as your mom, I'm sure, is scarred by it too, and that's something we all have to live with. But look at you now, right? You're a star, so it all worked out.
I had the added bonus of my parents listening to the experts and going, but this is what the expert said. This is what the teacher said. This is what the therapist said. And I had the lived experience of going, well, that didn't work.
Right. Then that's probably what helped, right? And especially at the time when you're listening to experts, they clearly didn't know anything. Or there was really very little known, right? And I guess you had that benefit of having seen it in action and seeing it fail.
And listening, because my dad worked government contracting. And I remember, and this is the stupid things you remember from being a kid, one of my second grade teachers was so stupid. She believed my father was watching HBO for the government and just because of where he worked. And there were, the big golf balls and the big satellites. And he convinced her that his job for the government was to watch HBO and to make sure the satellite images were coming across.
That would be a really
And
one
the-
job. Oh, gosh.
I'm just sitting there going, and you expect me to listen to you about anything else at this point?
Oh, God. It's amazing, and and plus theories change. I mean, the book that you cited, 10 years from now, there'll be another book that says the exact opposite. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Actually, I just listened to this podcast about neurology with my partner, and one of the big things he talks about in the book is the neurologist that we saw talking about the left and right brain and how I was really strong in the left brain and not the right brain. And I listened to a podcast recently. They're like, "Oh, we used to think this about the left and the right, but now we know that they actually all work together." I'm like, "Oh, wow. Nice 15 years of my life for a thing that's not even considered scientifically true anymore."
Yep. I mean, I went into theoretical physics. That's my educational background. You're like, but being in theoretical physics, hold on. Being in theoretical physics, you're always looking for the new thing and always being called crazy by all the other physicists because they're like, wait, what are you guys doing over there in quantum and theoretical? Do you know what you're doing?
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll tell you in 15 years.
Yeah.
But, the amount of therapists who were like, well, we have the scientific background and scientific fact. And I'm like, hi, I'm theoretical. Yeah, she's grown up with a theoretical physicist. There is no scientific fact. There's best scientific theories for right now.
Yep.
Mhm.
Right. And that's you test them, and then they get refuted, and they things change.
Well, and that's the thing. I feel like I learned to believe in and also question science and learning how science was done. All you're doing is forming a hypothesis, creating a way to test it, and based on the evidence you gather, gathering a conclusion about that hypothesis. And there's so many ways with the human mind, especially, where things can get tricky. And I feel like that's why a lot of people have called psychology a soft science. Why there's that great repeatability experiment. I forget what year it was done, where a lot of famous and referenced psychological experiments were not proven to be repeatable. And for me, the way that played out is when I got old enough to learn my diagnosis and learn what was projected for me. And, I was told that I wouldn't be able to control my mood without medication. I was told that I probably would have incredible challenges forming relationships and being social. I carried that with me, especially when I was a teenager, where I'm like, why should I even try? Like, I'm not going to be able to make any friends. I'm not going to ever have a girlfriend. And if I do, and I missed my meds for one day, I'm probably going to explode and scare them away. And now all of the teachers who are kind of responsible for showing up to these IEP meetings and tracking my progress are saying, Ryan seems to be really sad and moody all the time, and he's not making any friends. We must be right. That's science. Eventually, when I got to a new therapist and he told me, I don't think that you were diagnosed correctly. I feel like you're being mismedicated. I don't think a lot of these things are true. That was the first time I was ever provided an alternative perspective. And it was like it kind of shattered the glass ceiling in a way. And I'm like, well, if it's not out of my control, if I'm not destined for this lonely life of doom and the ball's really in my hands, what the hell am I waiting for? And I started doing all of the things they said I couldn't just to prove a point. And I start having all of this success. I go off my medications. I don't turn into this emotional mess. I learn to regulate. I do have success in forming friendships and forming relationships. I actually become quite popular in school. I go back to public and everything goes well. So if I never had that diagnosis, would that have happened? And can science and study really account for the complexity of the human mind and how much effect a self-fulfilling prophecy can have on somebody's life?
I'm nodding because I had the whole, if you don't take the meds, and then they upped my meds and upped my meds and then add did the bipolar meds with the lithium, with the Paxil, with the stuff for the ADHD, and I kept getting worse and worse. And they're like, well, you just need to also not be yourself to make friends. Just don't let them see your autism to make friends. And then once I started, and Leta's over there going, there's a reason I have no friends from childhood, because I didn't start until I was like in my 20s. And I run into friends from my childhood and they're like, who are you?
Yeah. Yeah. No, because you probably believed it, right? You probably were reluctant or shied away from trying. You're so busy trying to hide who you were that
Yeah.
you weren't yourself.
And being told you have to like what they like.
Yeah.
Don't like what you like what they like.
Yeah. Now
You can say that into your mic.
let me hear it.
But it does. It does defeat the principle of friends. That what next, Royal Lance?
It does, but the idea that the therapist had was if I could just pretend to be their friends long enough, maybe I could really become their friend.
Did that with Ryan. I had him read the Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, thinking, "All right, if I could just script this for him, and then it'll be easier." And he doesn't need he didn't need any of that. He just needed to be himself and have confidence. Self-confidence is everything. And by giving him that book, I probably was signaling to him, "Hey, you're terrible at this. This will help you." And that was awful. That was awful advice. But
It was interesting because to some degree the school environment is a hard way to measure. And part of it is like it was hard for me to form connections even with that advice because what is the general advice of that book? People love to talk about themselves. They don't want to hear about you. So just ask people questions and get them to talk about themselves, and they'll like you. And I was great at asking people questions. That's easy enough advice. That's practical. But what do you do when you're not around people who actually relate to you? When they're answering your questions and you're like, oh my God, I have like no knowledge about what you're talking about. And frankly, I don't really care about it so much. It's like you don't have to be everybody's friend. It's good to have some social skills. But really, when you go through life and you just be yourself, eventually you're going to be magnetic towards other people who are like you, who are going to really vibe with you, whether that's that you guys have common ground and things that you can relate over, or whether or not you just energetically have fun together. Some of my friends, I feel like we're nothing alike, but if we get in a room, we're going to have fun hanging out. That you can't script that with a book. You just have to have faith that it'll come.
You also can't script that with the therapist telling you what to do. And it was private therapy that my parents were paying an arm and a leg for, going, this is how you,
yeah,
it doesn't work that way.
I get they're trying to help. I mean, I know when I look at Ryan now and he's a success story, and I could write a book tomorrow saying, all right, the key to any of these issues is get outside and the power of the outdoors, and he's on this regimented diet. He doesn't eat a lot of processed foods, and if you just do this, everything's going to get fixed for you. And people would buy that book because they're people are desperate for an answer, right? A cure. It wouldn't be the cure for everybody. It might be helpful to some people, but not everybody. It's so individualized that you really have to figure it out for yourself, unfortunately.
And you really don't need a cure for your kid. And that's what I keep telling parents is you don't need a cure for your kid because they're perfect the way they are. Yes, I put Leta in speech and language pathology, physical therapy, and OT because I believed in those and they weren't trying to change things that didn't need to be changed. Except for one, yes, you can go ahead and say there was a bad one. You want to go talk about the bad speech therapist.
I'm gonna talk about the big evil devil building with that dead rotting pigeon right near it.
I think you were.
I don't think sometimes
Physical therapy was, I don't know, so I could walk.
Yeah, but and speech and language pathology was so you could talk. When I tell people you did not have receptive or expressive speech for a long time, they look at me weird.
Yeah.
But she's had some therapies, I think we all have, that the therapies were more traumatic sometimes than helpful.
Yeah.
I got force-fed pizza.
Also, not my fault for people's clothes smelling like complete and total throw up no matter how many times they wash the darn thing. Not my fault I throw up on you about like 50 times probably.
So
Not your fault.
Okay, yes.
Ryan had that one
I'm
too.
like burning inside. I'm like, I can't believe this happened at like a different place, different people. They called it mouth group in my first school, and literally, I hated milk. Something about it. It's like just like white water. What the hell is it? And they would just pour me a glass of milk and they'd be like, drink it. I'm like, that sounds like a terrible idea. Why would I do that? I hate this thing and you want me to drink it? And they're like, oh, well, if you don't do it, we're just going to wait here until you do. And I was really stubborn. All the other kids were like, really? I have to eat broccoli? And I'm like, I'm never eating that milk. You can keep me here for 1,000 years. I'm never going to take a sip of that. So they started going into my lunch and taking my dessert out and eating it in front of me and in front of all the other kids to try and break me. And they're like, we'll do this every day until you drink the milk. It was crazy that happens to people. 6-year-old.
Sounds like yes.
You want to respond, Leta?
Yeah, I'd reflex too, Lita. Ryan was a big thrower upper when he didn't like something.
Somehow they forced my jaw open, almost broke my jaw, and also forced me to chew the hand to make me swallow.
The therapist no longer has a job.
I hope that's her person is.
The other parents were all like, well, this is what you have to do. And my response was, you are the therapy group for one of the local colleges, like the therapists that were graduating college. This was where they were getting their clinical hours. And that's like, fun fact, I have the president of the college's personal cell phone number. I can make this go away.
It's crazy. Thank God you did that. I mean, that person should not be working with kids. My God.
She'd been working with kids since the 70s.
Well, that makes sense. It was different. It's a different time.
And she was training these new therapists, like Leta's got severe dyslexia. And she's like, well, just make her read. And I'm like, that's a great thought process. You want to tell me how the heck that works?
Table, put their hands behind their backs that are way longer than my whole entire body.
I know.
Force me to read. Faces are this big.
Yeah, and there's no
Can't
creativity.
even see them.
I mean, I learned early on he wasn't great at he could read, but he didn't process it as easily. But auditory, he loved listening to books. So this is before audiobooks were a thing, and I would have to scour the world to find a lot of the classics were on audio, and he loved them. And instead of having a protracted battle about reading some terrible whatever classic, he'd listen to it, and actually he retains them to this day. I mean, we talk about those books now, so it's just that they wish they were more creative. In your case, Lita, it would have been a lot easier than forcing you to read.
Yeah, and she's like, I'm glad I kept the shirt on. There's definitely a lot of traumatic experiences from these therapies. Go ahead.
I'm just glad I was strong enough to keep my...
Me too. Good.
They were the same gender as me.
That's the lines. You're right, correct about that for sure.
And I was the terrible mom who was coming in going, you guys have nothing behind you on this. What are y'all doing?
It's hard when you're fighting that way because they gang up on you. It's just you sometimes, and I don't know. It's you question your own. Because they always have that card to play. Like if you don't do this, the dead or in jail card they used to call it. They always say that about him. He's gonna end up dead or in jail. And what if they were right? But at some point you have to just trust your instincts, I think.
Well, like I said, I heard that one or two times about me, or a few hundred times about me, into my 20s. And then they'd say it about Leta, and I'm like, well, a lot of therapists, they have doctorates of and not PhDs. I have my PhD. The academia in me came out.
Yeah. Well,
And academia, there's a difference between PhD and doctorates of. And I'm like, well, you have a fake degree.
I don't even know. I never questioned what they had. Well, there's a lot of Harvard trained ones around here, so that tends to hold some weight.
Mm.
But
Most of my Harvard trained friends out that They all have doctorates of. They
Yeah.
don't have PhDs.
Yeah, no, we ran into some of that for sure, and I think it's a learned experience. Some of the best teachers that we ran into along the way were some people just get it. They get kids like this, and they're not. I think they're from big families. Sometimes they have a lot of siblings, and they had to negotiate a lot of conflict, and they just sort of diffuse things a little more easily than some of the other ones who I think were ready to go back to the book all the time. What your experience?
I feel like there was that. I also feel like it's interesting. The best luck I had was usually with like the intern step, like the people who been here for like a couple of years and they got into this because they wanted to help. And I wonder, I wonder if you dealing with so many kids, getting enough desks thrown at you. I wonder if people just sour with time and they really did come into it with good intentions and they lost their way. But the newer, fresher people who were still full of hope, I feel like they were willing to fit with me for a while. And when I was really going through it and had PTSD from the first school I was at, they were helping me undo it at the second school. Like, okay, I see, like, you like got agitated by this thing and you felt like you needed to run away and climb this tree or, to square up with these teachers so this thing wouldn't happen to you. But you see, like, way before that, there were some steps. And if at one of those steps you had just chosen to not do it, even though you really wanted to make your point, even though you really didn't want to do the thing they were asking, you wouldn't have to be here. And I feel like I learned a little bit of like, some battles are just worth losing to win the war,
Yeah, she had a neurologist. The neurologist that diagnosed her, he was autistic. His son was autistic. His opinion was meds don't work. Occupational therapy to show you how to deregulate works best. And he's like, once they turn 18, 19, 20, he's like, my son did the same thing you did. And he was very honest. He's like, I medicated my son. Did my audio go on me?
No, you're good. No, you're good.
Okay. He was like, I medicated my son. It was wrong. He's like, what he needed to do was learn how to regulate himself because the meds don't work after a time, according to him. And he's like, you're going to be on these things from 3 to 90. At some point in time, they were either going to kill you by overdosing you on them.
Yeah, that was we medicated way too young, way too much. I think the only reason we stopped was, I knew when he turned 18 or when he was never going to take them on his own volitionally, and so I didn't see the point. Even if it was helping, he's got to learn these coping skills without. And that final therapist that Ryan talked about, who really is a hero in the book. He was the first one who even talked about the side effects and the physical, things that his cholesterol was off the charts. He was really an unhealthy child. And, nobody ever mentioned that stuff when they were just doling out the pills. So you answer that.
Yeah, I mean, that was the hardest part. I mean, part of it was, I didn't have a chemical imbalance in my brain. I was traumatized from people trying to hurt me, even if they felt like it was necessary, even if they had whatever justification for it. I was terrified of them and I was going to do whatever to avoid that situation. And, like I said, there was some learning I needed to do. I was the kind of kid who, like, if I wanted to do something and you weren't going to let me do it just on principle, I was willing to, wait you out all day sitting in a tree. And I needed to grow out of that. But being medicated like I was bipolar was not doing that. Especially with the restraints, because whenever I sensed a restraint coming, I got into fight or flight. It wasn't that I was hot-headed and I was like having these big fits of anger that made me want to be violent. I frankly couldn't remember when the first punch was thrown a lot of times when those situations started. So whether I was on, 30 milligrams or 3,000, I was still having the same situation, and their only card to play was, okay, the meds aren't working yet. We need to go to a higher dose. We need to go to a higher dose, to the point where I really just didn't have much energy. And I think that's probably when we stopped, when I was so like low energy. My emotions were so numbed out. I really couldn't respond to anything in a big elevated way. And I wasn't as much of a problem. Um, but yeah, I gained a lot of weight. I lost a lot of motivation. I was more content just sitting on the couch playing Minecraft. Um, and my dad was right. I didn't know how harmful they were. I knew they were making my body look different. I knew that I was introduced to dieting at the age of, 12 or 13 when I was told I wasn't allowed to eat egg yolks anymore. I just had to eat the whites because they had too much cholesterol and my cholesterol was off the charts. Um, had I been told these will probably kill you by the time you're 30, I would have flushed them down the toilet instantly because I was very health conscious even at that age, especially as an athlete. Like anything that could hurt me, um, just like had no place in my life, and I would have done it the wrong way, if I had known.
I figured out the side effects when I had to go get sports med to sign off on me being on the meds again. And because I was trying for the Olympics and rifle, and one of the sports med guys went, "Why are you on bipolar medicine for your autism?"
Yeah, no, that's similar to the stuff that he was on, and those have the biggest. I mean, the side effects are obvious, right? But
Oh yeah,
and the your health, like long. I mean, our therapist said, does Ryan need these to live? And I remember looking at him thinking, because he said eventually it's going to cause him to die. So if he needs it to survive tomorrow, then you should take these meds. But if he doesn't, then you really should rethink this. And I never heard it in those terms.
I had wound up going to the hospital over how much meds I was taking. It was messing up my health that bad. And, these were what the doctors were telling my parents I needed to be on.
Yeah.
The thing was, I was over 18, so I could go, I have my own decision now.
Yeah. No, and it just like with the schools, I mean, I hate to come off as completely anti-med because there are people that are helped by, I'm sure. But it's case by case, and you really have to be careful because when they're young, and especially pre-puberty, I mean, these kids are on meds way too young and way too early, and you don't know what the long-term health effects are going to be. And again, it's one of the things Ryan wrote about in the book that I thought was really profound was he talks about, the meds were stifling or limiting his ability to be angry or sad. But at the same time, it was also limiting his ability to feel happiness or joy. And when you lose that, and even when we would ski and he would leave that, and he just, I don't know, he wasn't as elevated as he was, that's not worth any benefit that might come out of that. I think the cost is way too high.
The more they were upping my meds, the less I was losing my concentration, which is a problem when you're doing target shooting.
Yeah, it's the opposite, right? You were in a circumstance where they want hyper focus.
It's like, I might want the hyper focus. I was losing, I didn't want to, like Ryan said, I didn't want to do stuff. I didn't want to do my school work, which was a problem when you're in college and you're doing hard sciences.
Yeah, for sure.
I was having a hard time, I'm taking high level math where losing a negative sign is a problem. I was losing them all the time.
Yeah. And, now.
And this was,
now he won't even
this was
aspirin. So I don't know if you're the way. Did it color you for the rest of your life? Or is it?
a little bit. Then I found out I've got a soy allergy, which makes for a legitimate, I can't take this med. Because a lot of the meds, when I had her, I had arguments with the OBGYN because they're like, you have to take this med. And I'm like, it has this soy in it. I might not want to take it, or I have to take my Epic.
Yeah.
But I did find out Benadryl is a great thing to have when you're 36 hours into labor and you don't want to be awake for the rest of it.
Oh, which is even worse. Wow. I know it does knock you out, but I never thought it was that powerful. Wow.
When we had her, she's a one and only for a reason. She was pregnancy 13. I was 36 hours in. The anesthesiologist is like, she's not moving. We need to get this done. You're allergic to the epidural. So we're giving you 3 shots of Benadryl and an IV bag in 15 minutes.
And you fell asleep.
Supposedly I was slightly awake, but I don't remember it. And the anesthesiologist went, "That's fun trying to get you to push when you're not
Sweet.
reacting to-"
That's incredible. Wow. I never thought of that powerful. Holy cow.
But I didn't have the epidural until 36 hours into having her.
Yes. Oh, I can imagine.
But I did want to talk a little bit, and I realized we're coming up against the hour mark, and I told you an hour. I'm either like, we're either going to have you guys on another time or keep talking longer.
We're chatty, so we're gonna go as long as you need. Yep.
One of the things we continuously hear from parents, because Leta's starting this autistic dance studio. My kid can't. I don't want my kid to try. I don't want them to fall and fail.
We could just make them shut up and tie their mouth shut and tie them to a chair, and I don't know, just completely let your child break their souls and spirits and confidence. Get them good?
Let's not tie parents to chairs like we tie autistic kids to chairs.
Shush. It's called revenge for their children. Shush you, shush.
Obviously, Ryan turned out amazing. Can you guys talk a little bit about what you guys are doing nowadays, especially you, Ryan, so that parents know Leta's not an oddity, as they keep telling me?
Yeah, these days, I guide for Acadian mountain guides, so I take people rock climbing, and I feel like that is a testament, to how wrong they were about me, because they said that I couldn't look after myself, I couldn't be unsupervised, and now, people show up. Sometimes people leave their kids with me and, trust in me to bring them to do a very dangerous activity. Not that rock climbing is, inherently very dangerous as a sport, but user error can be very costly. So you need to be very attentive, to what's going on. And you also need to be able to work with people in a stressful situation. When people are scared of heights, they don't always act rationally. And that's what I do with my life now. And, I would dare say I'm pretty good at it. I've stuck with the skiing, for quite a long time, and have skied all over the world. My most recent expedition, was to Baffin Island, which is in the Canadian Arctic. And only a couple people visit there, every year, if any. There's no established services to bring you out there. You have to make contact with, native Inuits who live on the island, to get a snowmobile ride into the mountains. And then you're just out there on the sea ice with polar bears. There's no chairlifts. You're climbing all the mountains yourself and skiing down them. So I feel like that's really where, my world is at these days with skiing is, I've shifted my interests towards not just skiing mountains, but climbing them and skiing them. And I have a YouTube channel, where you can watch those adventures. It's just my name, Ryan Delana. And the YouTube is growing. So I feel like, video making and, storytelling in that way is going to continue to be a part of my life moving forward.
Now we can hear you.
Now I'm having issues. I'm hearing from you, you definitely wound up dead or in prison, right?
Definitely not. No, he's thriving. He's and as happy and as alive as any 23-year-old. It's ironic how the kids that I think had the easier pathway, and they went to stars in high school and college, and they go through that 20s where they're now I'm a grown up. What do I do now? And what am I really doing? And do I really want to be a lawyer, a doctor? I don't feel any of that with him. I mean, he's just always known what he loved, and he does it every day, and it's a joy to follow him and read about his adventures, even if I'm not on them, because I can live vicariously through him, and I know what he's seeing and what he's doing, and it's been great. It's a good feeling as a father.
Continuing that feeling as a father, having the courage to give him the outlet of skiing and let him is a pretty probably wrong word there, but let him go on these rock climbing adventures and these skiing adventures. Do you ever regret letting him do all this?
No, it was kind of fun because here he was, this kid that we weren't allowed to do anything, or we were always constantly on him, and then it took skiing because we got out, on the top of a hill somewhere. He was just better than I was. He also could memorize the maps. He knew where he was going. I never knew where we were going. I would get lost. I would fall down, and I sometimes would get scared, and when I would be relying on this 8, 9, 10-year-old kid to get me out of the gym and help me. And so with each of those experiences, I gained more and more confidence in him. And I watched, his decision making was always good. He wasn't doing crazy things just to show off. He always studied things, and he read the snow reports, and he knew everywhere we were going. And so when he decided, I think, to make it a career aspiration, I knew he'd be a great, guide, and he really was the kind of person. He didn't fall apart in a crisis. I would immediately fall apart, and he stays detached, and he follows protocol, and that's what you want in that kind of circumstance. So, there are times when I know he's in places where things could happen, bad things could happen, but I mean, I always say I worry more about him driving there, or the stuff he can't control, than I feel like once he's on a mountain or in a circumstance like that, he's relying on his training, his instincts, and I think he's in pretty good hands. When he's on a highway somewhere and you have no control of who's next to you and who's driving the other car, those are the things you worry more about as a parent.
Do you ever I'm trying to figure out how to say this because I get this all the time from parents of newly diagnosed autistic children where they're like, well, I need to smother them or bad things are going to happen. And Leta is looking at
You
me.
don't have a child anymore. When they grow up and they completely and totally disown you, it's your own damn fault.
I can feel that.
Do you ever feel like letting him ski when he was young was something you were worried about? Not necessarily the double diamonds and all that, but just even like the bunny hills. Were you ever worried like, oh no, if I let him do these bunny hills, he might be able to find something he loves?
I felt when he would record stuff and play the videos, and he was so young and he was doing these really advanced trails and places, I could feel the teachers, the parents questioning my sanity. And I would replay that in my head, think, if he does ever get hurt or something worse, they're all going to point their fingers and say, were you crazy? You knew this was the risk you were taking. You let this kid just go off on his own. Because once he got to the point where he was that much better than me and I couldn't go with him, he was allowed to really explore mountains on his own. And I really had to make his own decisions as a pretty young person in some dangerous situations. And I think that was more stressful. That, it's like that, nobody thinks their kid is going to get, abducted at a park, but we still smother because you don't want to be that parent whose kid got abducted at the party, even though it's a zillion to one odds, right? And so I did have that fear. I think that I told you so, that you let this kid, who should have never had this freedom, have this freedom. But I just kept going back to my instinct and saying, I just see him getting, more confident in loving this. And why would I want to stifle it? I don't see him living any other way. And yes, is there inherent danger here? Sure, there is, but there isn't a lot of things. And he just liked it too much to stop him.
For sure. And that was a thing that happened with me, is like when I got to the point where, I did start to feel a little bit of that of like, oh, I don't know if I can let you do that. I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. How are you going to stop me? If I drop in right now, are you going to come after me? Because I'll see you at the bottom. And that was probably poor behavior on my part, but there was a lot of times that I knew in my heart, I'm like, I know I can ski that. I'm looking at it and sizing it up, and I'm certain I can ski it. If I need to do it just to show you that I can, I'll do it 1,000 times over until you believe to trust me. And eventually he did. It also probably helped that I got him out of enough jams of, him calling me like, I lost my ski and I don't know where I am. And I'm like, tell me what it looks like. And I'm like, oh, you're in that gully. I'm going to go tell ski patrol to go down this gully and they'll help you,
True.
We have a lot of parents who are like, well, but if I let them do dance, maybe they'll start living on their own when they're 18.
Well, why are they scared of that?
Yeah, that should be the goal. I know it's hard, I think, to picture, but it's hard to picture with any kid that the first time they get behind the wheel of a car, and your kid's 16, and you're like, my kid's like, I still wipe his mouth with the napkin, like he's, what. How does I put this 6,000-pound machine in his hands? There's always those moments, right, where you don't think they're capable, but they are, and it's
And kids really, the thing is, like, the rubber band snaps back as hard as you pull it, right? And I was lucky that because he did learn to trust me and did let me have freedom. I didn't feel like I had to lie. I didn't feel like I had to hide things. I didn't feel like I needed to rebel. It's the kids who don't have an inch to wiggle when they're at home. And then eventually they do get to the age where, like, even if you don't give them a car, even eventually they're going to be old enough where they can start doing stuff on their own. But as soon as kids got out of the house, they're like, I'm going to purge tonight. Like, we're going to do the crazy. We're going to go into abandoned buildings. We're going to drive 150 miles an hour on the highway, drag race each other. Like, they were just waiting for that. And the second they got it, they went as hard as they could. And frankly, a lot of them didn't have the skill set to get themselves out of situations because they never had freedom and therefore they never made mistakes. So they never had to fix mistakes. So now it's like we're at 3 a.m. and the car is stuck in the mud and we're like, what are we going to do? And generally I felt like I was the person to be calm in that situation and think like, oh, well, we have this option. We could do this. We could put a mat under the tire, they're going to take the freedom whether you like it or not. So you might as well give it to them in little bits so they have an opportunity to learn.
And train them, like you were saying. Bits. Yeah, bits are a good thing for freedom. She's like, bits?
Bit person. I could have gone bits instead of, I don't know.
well, I could
You kind
dance for those. It must be an awesome experience. It's it's free and they're able to express themselves and it's social and fun. I'd have a hard time coming up with a downside, and I could probably see the downside to most things, but that one seems like it's all upside.
the worst part is if you've got them in the traditional studios, because they are very much,
It's competitive.
they don't know what they don't know, and they're very. She's like, there's too much trauma there to share. And they all are like, oh, we love the kids with autism, but they don't know. She's screaming across the room, liars. I think they actually do have a heart. They just don't know what they don't know. So things like she's got a problem looking people in the eyes. They're like, oh, you're being disrespectful. Or,
I felt that a
and
little bit with skiing was, I would look over at the race kids and the competitive part of me, I'm like, he's so good. If I could just stick him in there, he'd probably be an Olympian. And it would have been the worst thing because I would have taken this great, free, loving, this experience he was having and stuck him into this competitive environment with stopwatches and timing is everything. And he would have been good, but I think it would have soured him on the sport, honestly.
well, in dance, a lot of it, if you want to go on past 18, it stops being competitive. It starts being performance. And while you are competing, theoretically speaking, for those jobs, I mean, aren't you competing for any job in life? But they're so focused on those competitions because they're like, well, parents want these competitions. And I'm like, but you forgot to teach the kids how to perform. You just taught them how to do all the tricks to compete. And so they get to Broadway, they get to Hollywood, and they can't get a job because they weren't taught what they needed to know to be in the industry.
I could see that. Yeah, no, I see a lot of that. I mean, the whole, don't get me started on the whole club sport thing. I mean, it's really the race to nowhere. I mean, there's a great book about it. It really is. And parents, I know, I mean, I fell for it too. I mean, I had a daughter who played softball and I coached and I was that coach, and so it's easy to want to relive it, but it's their experience. They should be allowed to like it, hate it, and we tried things he didn't like, and he called our garage a graveyard of failed attempts, and we had hockey sticks.
Yeah, there's hockey
Golf
sticks,
clubs.
racquetball, every sport I ever showed interest in. He's like, oh, this is finally the time. And it took something to hold my attention, and it also there were aspects of it I just wasn't good at. I didn't know how to cash, um, throw very well, and I didn't like competing against other people. I just wanted to have fun. I wanted to enjoy something, and I was so competitive. I would be so bummed out when I lost, and I was just the type of kid where I was like screaming over a board game because just like got so into it. I needed a place where I could find progress for me and define my own terms of competition.
I think a lot of parents forget you can do that in dance without the competition part. But she's like, competition studios are evil. Some kids have fun at it. And I think that's great for them. One of the other things is like, she has an autoprocessory disorder. She needs you to show her what you want her to do, which you would think, go ahead, Leta.
If I have one more person give me big talk, they'll hear me. That's all.
It's frustrating.
No doubt.
Well,
I am a human. No doubt. Do not call me good girl.
The things that we remember as a child.
wow. I get something
But
with me.
because she has problems sometimes processing, the spoken language and the written language. I mean, this is autism, language issues here, right? And they were like, well, she must be about the age of a 3-year-old. You can go.
They talk to me like I was a freaking dog.
Mhm.
Also, this
3-year-old.
canine bites.
Yeah. That's all. You're the wittiest 3-year-old I ever heard of, Leta. You're a 3-year-old.
And I mean, they were all like, oh, we love her so much. And I'm like, I can tell you why she doesn't think so. Because they're like, but we were trying to be nice. We were trying to be respectful of the fact that she's, mentally not as capable as the other children.
What do you do with the parents? Is it easier if you have them drop and leave, or can you encourage them to? I'm sure they want to hover, right? Do you discourage the hovering?
It depends. If they want to hover just because they want to hover, we kind of discourage the hovering. Um, we do have a lot of asking the kids if they are capable of saying, I want the parent here. We're trying to get into a new facility where we have a lobby where I'm going to have closed circuit television so the parents can see, but not be in the dance studio.
Good idea. Yeah, I can see that.
Having that IEP meeting with them, we took the best parts of the IEP because I think we all know there's some not so great parts of the IEP. But, I've been looking at IEPs for a good chunk of my life. I think I know what the best is. And it's sitting the parents down because they kind of understand the format. So they're used to going, oh, this is a format. And me going, okay, all I need you to tell me is this. And then having a discussion going, okay, here's how we're going to individualize this to your child. Here's what you just said. And this is how we're going to teach them. They've got this level of language. This is how we make it work for them. And you don't have to be in there because our teachers are not going to yell at them for not understanding language. We're going to work with them. Also, having only 1 to 4 kids, 4 or 5 kids per class works. There are some classes, like our adult level classes, we've got some parent-kid combos in the adult level classes, and it's not really that they're hovering, but the parent's autistic, the kid's autistic, they want to take dance together.
Parents, great idea. I mean, I was going to ask that too. That I can see that format working too, because then they have to get over if you're bad. I mean, I would be terrible at it, so I would imagine that some people it's embarrassing at first, right? Until you get to be a little bit better.
It can be. I think there's so many different types of dance, and the most popular is definitely tap because it leans more towards drumming. If you don't do, there are 18 different types of tap, and the Broadway lyrical Rockette tap is not the most popular. Also, not the most exciting to watch. A lot of the other forms of tap, you are the drummer, so you have to learn how to improvise. You have to learn how to find that beat yourself, which tends to be something neurodivergent people are much more excited about than, say, structured ballet.
Do you still shoot?
Not so much anymore. My dad's still involved. He's trying to make the officials group for 2028
That's
over in LA.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I gave it up around college just because it was like I've got other things to do and trying to figure out as an adult how, especially the 80s and 90s, we weren't trained what we were supposed to do once we went into the real world,
Yeah, for sure.
which is probably why I'm not the best parent of a special needs kid,
Uh-oh.
because I'm like,
Think
yeah,
he's
you
on.
have to train them, you weirdos. They do turn 18 at some point.
That's it.
And so I was spending more
credit for sure.
I was spending a little bit more time trying to figure out how does this world work for me? Because you still had, especially back then, even in my 20s, I had doctors going, well, you need to be on birth control because you're autistic and you shouldn't have a child.
Serious? Oh
Yeah.
my God. That was the 80s? Oh,
That was in the
Not-
90s and early 2000s.
Oh.
And I think the last time I had a doctor tell me that was right after I had her, actually.
that's amazing. Oh, I'm sorry. That's awful. God. Oh,
She's looking at me. Girls were, I mean, and it's not saying that boys don't have it hard. Trust me, the boys in the special needs area have it just as hard.
yeah.
But I do love how, what are you looking at?
But I was just saying, didn't you say it was scientifically proven that the male has to carry the autism gene for the child to be autistic?
We're
So
getting closer and
technically-
closer to that. Yeah.
Is it true? I didn't
They
I
mean the
didn't know
boys shouldn't have children.
that's interesting.
Let's not going down that. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it looks like dads are carrying it. And there's a brand new study that just came out
Oh.
that I got to get my hands on more than just the abstract, saying that people with autism have 75% paternal genes.
Interesting.
You should have 50-50.
Oh,
And if that's true, that's a whole different ballgame for what autism is.
okay.
And they were looking at siblings with autism and showing that they share more paternal genes even than that. And, you should share 50-50 with your siblings, not be close to somewhere between 76 and 89% sharing of genes.
Wow. I'll be curious to read that study. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm like, I gotta get more. Paternal's your father's genes. She's like, what's paternal? Paternal father, maternal mother. Which, begs the question, we're all sitting there, for years they've been saying, well, autism's, just a learning disability. Well, obviously it's not.
Oh, for sure.
There's a lot of the neurology that goes behind it, but you still have, she's had dance teachers. She's homeschooled, so I don't have to deal with the school system.
That's a smart move.
But she had dance teachers telling me, oh, we only use 10% of our brain. And I'm like, how long ago did you go to school? There's a lot of, there was a whole thing back in the 80s and 90s, I want to say, that we only use 10% of our brain.
Maybe at any one time, if every single neuron you had was always firing, it'd be a pretty noisy place to be. But I
Yeah.
feel like that's mostly. I swear to God, I saw a movie that the whole premise is like you only use like 10% of your brain, and unlock
Oh, yeah.
someone.
That was a good
And
one.
I feel like people just took that and started saying it factually. I mean,
The NIH likes to just publish any study they give money to, which is where we get a lot of bad science from.
We're on the same page there.
And because the other thing I'm having to tell parents is please do not get your science from dance teachers in this area, because the dance teachers clumped onto a deal that came out 2 years ago saying autism and Parkinson's are the same thing.
I cannot picture that one at all. And
No, Leta's like, I don't like these people.
no.
No, the whole idea was they're like trimmers and stimming look the same. They must be the same. So Parkinson's, but
They're not even remotely the same. Like, I mean, I mean, these
And so
outsides.
the dance studios here in town, their autism classes are based off Parkinson's. And I'm like, that's cute. Not the same.
That is.
But yeah, that 10% study was an NIH study going, oh, the rest of it's just useless brain.
Doesn't that feel like they're feeding up for a medication? There's the next, if you just take this, you'll get rid of your tremors. That's crazy.
I'm like, and they didn't see anyone with autism or Parkinson's. They didn't look at the way they're treated. They just were like, oh, everyone with autism has stimming. Everyone with Parkinson's has tremors. Therefore, they're the same thing.
God.
I really wish I could have written my dissertation that way. I just think this. So
I know. It's well, hopefully getting the word out through this medium. I think it's probably where you reach the most people. And I've learned more from podcasts than I mean, I'm always probably too much.
that's right. Yeah, she's like, how much time are we talking? We have kept you guys more than the hour. And I still haven't gotten into half the
We're
stuff.
daddy, so well, you can have us back anytime. We're always around. He's a little hard,
I will definitely.
but we're
Yeah.
but even individually, if it makes more sense to talk to us one at a time, or
I mean, we would love to have both of you guys back on together individually, whatever works for you guys. If y'all don't mind here in a few months.
No, it's fun. It's great talking to you, but I learn a lot from being a guest on your show. So it's pretty fun.
Well, and I'm sure our audience is going to love you guys being on the show. Thanks for coming on. Sorry I kept you longer than.
Definitely. And the book's called Without Restraint: How Skiing Saved My Son's Life. It's available on Amazon everywhere. It's a parenting story. I think some people look at it and think, "Oh, I'm not a skier. I won't be interested in it." Skiing is, it's a metaphor kind of thing for what went on. And Ryan's a great follow on YouTube and Instagram, and he's always doing something fun and exciting. And he talks a lot about his journey, and even to this day. And I think I learned a lot from reading his posts as well.
We're going to have those links in the description below and on the website, because we have bios of every one of our guests on letastapstyles.com, and all that will be on there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Thanks for the chance to talk. We really enjoyed it.
Thanks for coming on.
And if
Leta,
you
can you
find
say
me
bye
on
real
socials, feel free to reach out. Let me know where you found me from, so I know who you are and what you know. I always look like, oh, I read the book and I looked you up, and I'm like, oh man, that's really cool. So I always appreciate hearing from people, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone ever has. Thank you guys for having me on.
You want to tell everyone what your socials are real quick, because everyone has their own socials these days.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that my YouTube, if you want to see my adventures in cinematic format, is just Ryan Delana. My Instagram is probably where I post the most, and where you're most likely to get a reply from me is extreme_Ryan_Delana.
And probably no TikTok, since this will be airing after the TikTok ban. Right?
Exactly. He
never
went
TikTok.
down that rabbit hole. Funny. And I was trying to push him to do it, but he just never was interested in it.
I finally broke down and got TikTok for the dance studio, and that's when the ban took effect. So.
Which probably
TikTok is where all the cuckoo people is.
No, I think you're right, Leta.
Yes.
I was telling him, like, I see a lot of people making a pretty good living on there. So, but not his jam.
It's short-lived. The D'Amelios were a thing in like 2020. I watched a video on their downfall in 2022.
Yeah, and
Billy Crush.
for the second year in a row, they do brand studies to see what generations trust what. And Gen Alpha, Leta's generation, or age and younger, they're trusting YouTube. And I'm like, did someone forget to tell me it's the early 2000s again?
No, yeah, YouTube really did have a resurgence, and it's in the content on there. There's so much content, and it's you really have no way of banning any of it. But there's good stuff for it.
But she's like, I can find science on YouTube.
There is. I mean, it definitely is. I mean, you probably could, in a homeschool environment, I'm sure there's lectures, and there's some, great stuff that it's available and it's free, and it's good.
All right. I'm
I'm
gonna
just saying.
everyone off because I can back to the rabbit hole myself. You guys are trying to say goodbye to us, and then want to hell.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, have a great one, and we'll see you guys again soon.
Hello, thank you for watching the cafe. Please subscribe and also look at the adorable pages. Just go to subscribe for it and also please the text. And don't forget to share the great friend festival with any other new podcast with you. And also you can see the adorable pages. Just like it.